Lots of year-ender lists out there this time of year, and with our Supreme Court expert Mark Fernich on the panel tonight, we're going to do a little review and preview for you of the legal stories of the year. First of all, the year's top ruling from the Supreme Court. And Mark, this one was a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. The same-sex marriage ruling, obviously. Neither side got what they wanted, but it was really the right outcome. You had a reaffirmation of the principle that domestic relations is a core states' rights issue, and by enacting a uniform federal definition of marriage, the federal government effectively abrogated the positions of states that had recognized same-sex marriages.
And while I look up what abrogated means,
invalidated.
Was this the ruling? Also, the force behind the ruling in Utah that basically allowed same-sex marriage there? Is it based on the same ruling?
Not so much, because it's a states' rights issue. The feds, in the case before the Supreme Court, clearly overstepped their authority by trying to meddle in a core states' rights issue, meaning family law.
Because we got New Mexico on Thursday and Utah on Friday. In consecutive days, basically legalized same-sex marriage, and it didn't make the news. I mean, it barely made the news because it seems like it's happening everywhere. I know we ask this a lot, Dominic, but this is going to be everywhere before too long, right?
I think we've talked about this night after night,
yeah.
And my consistent line on that is, and I really believe this, that train left the station a long time ago. So yes, to answer your question.
All right, let's move on.
Well, what's remarkable is how quickly there's been a change in public perception about it. If you compare it to the prior civil rights movements and how quickly this one moves, our society moves at warp speed now, and the internet has a lot to do with that, obviously.
All right, let's move on to the trial of the year, and this one would seem like another no-brainer. It's the Zimmerman case, and this feels like, Mark, another case where a lot of people think the justice just wasn't served in the long run.
Well, regardless of the merits of that particular case, it shined a light on the stand your ground laws and spurred a lot of public debate and discussion about that. So long after Zimmerman hopefully fades from our collective memories, maybe he won't beat up somebody else. In the interim, the more lasting issue will be the validity of these stand your ground laws, and that's a helpful.
But the problem with stand your ground laws in Florida, Mr. Zimmerman walked based upon the evidence. That's the American system that we have. But two people of color, one woman in a high-profile case, she just got out of jail. She received 20 years for defending herself against her husband. And there's a case now with a man that was in the military defending himself. He's locked up.
But the problem with the Zimmerman case, not to go back and tear this wound open, the problem with it was a very weak case to begin with, which is why, political motivations aside, the local county prosecutors declined to prosecute it. It was a classic he said case, and the one who would have been, who would have been saying it for the government was dead. So it was a very, very tough case for the government to make. When it went up to the state level, it was brought for political reasons, it was cover for everybody, and the trial played out the way that it had to play out. It's tragic, obviously, when somebody loses a life. But that doesn't mean that the person is guilty of murder.
But you know what I'm curious about? In light of Mr. Zimmerman's actions since he was acquitted,
yeah, he's a nutbag.
What does that say
Listen,
about
what
him?
does it say when you join the neighborhood watch to begin with? I mean, it says that you're nutty.
There are plenty of good people, I think, who are on neighborhood watches.
We don't know that he's bad. It's not that he's bad for joining neighborhood watch, but we have the cop wannabe, all his nuttiness about guns. He's clearly mentally unstable. Is he guilty of murder? That doesn't follow from being mentally unstable. He's a menace, clearly.
All right, I want to get to, I asked Mark what the top legal story of 2013 was, and he said stop and frisk. You might think that's because it was the ruling that seemed to cut the legs out from underneath the program, but Mark, you were saying no, it's actually the appeal that cut the legs out from under the judge.
Well, I think it's extraordinary because the appeal hadn't even been perfected, meaning brought to completion. This was just a motion for temporary relief to stay it while the appeal was decided. No party, not the city, not the plaintiffs, said Judge Shinlin, the trial judge, should be thrown off the case, and the appeals court, the Second Circuit, did this completely on their own. They threw her off the case completely on their own without a request from either party. Beyond the politics of it, the disrespect for a fellow judge, I can't remember anything like that happening at this stage in a litigation in this area.
And they basically said she went shopping for the case. She wanted the case in her courtroom.
Part of it she went shopping for, and part of it she made intemperate, according to them, remarks to the media. Now, I tried Junior Gotti's case in front of her. It's an exemplary jurist, and she has a mind of her own, much like Judge Weinstein in Brooklyn. And she doesn't deserve this kind of shabby treatment, in my view, from the Second Circuit. She probably shouldn't have gone out and done those interviews, but she didn't do anything wrong, if you read the transcript, by making the suggestion, hey, why don't you bring a new lawsuit as a related action in front of me?
But the question now is what's going to happen? The mayor-elect says that he's going to drop the appeal.
And they are, and it's going to be mooted out. And
so what does that mean?
The appeal is going to end. It will be moot. There won't be a live controversy anymore. And what will stand from this is the extraordinary action they took in removing the judge. It has symbolic force, and that's what will be remembered.
I'm confused.
It's basically, I guess
if there's an appeal and the city says, hey, we're not pursuing that policy anymore, in order for the case to go forward, there has to be an actual dispute. There is no dispute anymore because they've gotten...
Her ruling basically gets more or less tossed away.
Right, that's what I'm confused about.
No, her ruling will stand. It will not have been...
But how does her ruling stand when the appellate court tossed her from the case?
She's tossed, but they haven't decided the merits of the appeal yet. This was just the way they got rid of her.
And they're not going to decide the merits of the appeal?
No, they will not decide the merits of the appeal.
Okay.
And
so her ruling will stand.
And all this with Bill Bratton coming back as police commissioner, and he has been a fan of stop and frisk. He's talked
He started stop and frisk.
Right, so it's all of the campaigning we saw. We thought this was going to be a fairly moot case when de Blasio became the nominee and then the mayor-elect, because he pledged to do away with stop and frisk. Maybe not so fast.
Well, I think
if it comes back, then there's going to be a decision on the appeal. They're going to have to affirmatively say through the de Blasio administration, this is a nullity. We're not doing it anymore. It's a dead issue. So that's it. We're withdrawing the appeal.
The mayor-elect, he's got several landmines standing right in front of him. He said in selecting his chancellor, he would involve parents. He backed off of that. He's not involving parents. So now we'll see what he does on stop and frisk.
And
if
he looks like he turns his back on stop and frisk,
he's done.
That's the biggest landmine of all. All right, up next, let us entertain you. The trends of 2013 in entertainment, what to look for in 2014, from TV and movies to the Broadway stage. Columnist Michael Mostow joins us next.